Hello everyone, and welcome to week 9. Got plenty to go through today's cohort meetup, so hopefully you're sitting comfortable, cup of tea or coffee or a glass of water. We'll just wait a minute or two so that everyone can join the session. Okay, it looks like we've got everyone rolling in, so we might get started. So, as always, welcome and hello. Hope you've had good weekends and ready to tear into the week. We're already motoring through January, so it feels like we're back into the swing of things already. We'll go through a few of the customary intro items. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and are broadcasting the event today. I'd like to acknowledge the Dharawal people, the traditional custodians of the land just south of Sydney, where I am speaking from today. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples joining us today. Some of the normal reminders, we record this session. We won't be using or distributing any contributions you make, so any comments that you make in the chat, or if you're called upon to have a chat or have a question, we won't be using that. I don't think there are any external guests today, so you don't have to be so sensitive perhaps. And as usual, we would love to keep you all to keep your camera on so we can see your lovely faces. Just a heads up that we will be removing the AI bots who have auto-joined the call, just because it sort of leads to a slightly spammy situation afterwards. We will be including links to the recording afterward that has a full transcript of the service. So if you want to grab the transcript and feed it into your AI bot of choice, then you're more than welcome to. Okie doke, week 9. We're going to be talking a lot about the next 3 or 4 weeks and also the phase 2 selection process, which obviously is super duper crucial. And then next week we'll be having a special cohort meetup actually with an RDC Ask Me Anything session, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a few minutes' time. So as usual, we'll be doing a couple of ecosystem updates. We'll be diving into the phase 2 selection process, and then we'll wrap up with what's happening in the week ahead over the next few days. For ecosystem updates, I might pass across to Anna, if you can give us an update on this. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you, Jess. Morning, everyone. So as usual, we're sharing things that we have think might be relevant. You may have seen that on the Slack channel, but just want to remind, currently there's 2 proof of concept type of funding open from the 2 regional development corporations, so GRDC and MLA. So the one on the left is a very general, they call it proof of concept fundings. It can be funding for any, I would say, early stage, so TRL3 to TRL5 kind of first prototype developing activities. So if you think you will benefit from that fundings, just in mind that the application due in 14th of February, you can find the details on the website or on the Grow Ag website as well. So I think many of you may be eligible for it. And if grain industry is your choice, it's time to apply. The one on the right is from Meat Livestock Australia. This one is slightly more targeted. So they have a particular scope looking for solution that can help in areas of either vegetation monitoring and assessment, and particularly they're looking for non-pasture related monitorings or virtual fencing, where in that proposal they did ask for a technology that is relatively more mature. They have gave an indication of TRL 8 and plus, and on on top of that, they're also looking for a solution that can do on-farm data and digital tools. In this one, that one is slightly more vague, so there's no requirement for TRL levels. Anyhow, I do encourage you to apply for it. They have not indicated fundings. This one is probably at much bigger for supporting I would say relatively mature technology to be commercialized and tested in the context of the livestock industry. So conscious that the deadline is coming soon. So if you have any inquiries, the proposal and the grant proposal actually does include the main innovation manager's contact details. So I encourage you to reach out and get some clarification as soon as possible. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Anna. A couple of good opportunities there. And Ben, I might ask you to give us an update on next week's cohort meetup.
Thanks, Joz. So continuing on from Anna, who was talking about some RDC funding opportunities. In next week's meetup, we are lucky to have 4 RDCs who are offering some of their time for all of you innovators to ask them any question that you might have. So those 4 RDCs are GRDC, CRDC, Hood Innovation, and Dairy Australia. This will be really the entire duration of the cohort meetup next week, and we will be setting up separate meeting invites for each of these 4 Ask Me Anything sessions. What we would love from yourselves by the end of tomorrow is your preference as to your first preference and second preference of the RDC you'd like to be in a group with. And so we'll use that to then create the 4 different groups for next week's meetup. This will be an opportunity to essentially ask them any questions that you might have. It may be questions to learn insights about your particular customer base. It may be questions related to funding, maybe questions related to the industry writ large. So we think this will be a great opportunity for all of you for next week. I'll post into the chat shortly a link to the survey. If you just submit one response by the end of tomorrow. It should only take a few seconds to complete once you know what your preferences are. And look out for invites later on in the week for that. And in the meantime, prepare your questions as well. Back to you, Joss.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, great opportunity. Good chance to speak to the actual IDCs that aren't always the most accessible sort of organisations to penetrate. So yeah, great opportunity for the cohort. Any other ecosystem updates? We actually seem to have a bunch of things happening across the cohort last week. There were multiple websites launched. There was a great field trial that had made good progress. Is there any innovator on the call today that wanted to give a quick shout out of either some news or an event or a milestone or a good meeting, customer discovery, insight, anything like that? Any brave souls wanting to give a heads up? I'm just looking through, because I mean, you definitely don't want me picking on someone just to give you an update. Ryan, do you want to give us a quick heads up?
Yeah, we got contacted by the AgriFutures organisation, and they've listed us on their website, and we've kind of been drafting up an investment opportunity that's going to go out to their network within the coming weeks to hopefully have some meetings around a vote. So yeah, it's pretty exciting. And yeah, they've got some good meetings lined up for us, and they've got us into the Wednesday night event, which will be some good networking. So yeah, pretty pumped on that.
Oh, nice one. Sounds good. And I think nice work, Ryan. The next person who I can't quite see on my screen, but that looks like Jorg, is it?
Yes. So we got invited or made contact with Tony at the North Queensland, the TNG Trout Hub, and got invited to have a stall and also giving a talk about water monitoring. So heading up to Cairns on the 9th till 11th of February.
Oh, right. Oh, that's awesome. That's a very good little update. Congrats on that. Okay, I don't think I see any more hands up on my screen, so let's keep motoring. Thanks for both those updates. Okie dokie, so we're going to get into the bulk of the session. We've sort of got two different parts of the session on the phase 2 selection process. The first one is going to be focusing on the playbook for your venture, and I'll ask Jeremy to take over from here and go through this section.
All right, thanks, Justin. Hello, everybody. Feels like it's been maybe at least a few sessions since I've been able to chat with you and you've been able to hear my lovely voice. So hello again, welcome back. Happy New Year to anybody I haven't seen. So like Justin said, going to go through essentially what we're at this point calling the playbook for your venture. So firstly, just a reminder on how we've structured phase 1 here. So when you're working with your VB, you should be talking a lot about risks, which assumptions that your venture is based on you've validated, which need more work, and how you're moving to improve your venture's viability. We're doing this through 3 major activities. So one is identifying and prioritizing the risks. So what are the risks? Which ones are, kind of more crucial to the venture's future? Creating activities to validate those risks. So that might be speaking to customers, that might be looking at organizing trials, that might be refining some of the information in your pitch and how big the market is, market sizing, etc. So a whole suite of activities there, and likely a lot of the focus of your one-on-one time with the venture builder as part of the studio. And then thirdly, really communicating the opportunity that your venture represents. And this is done largely through developing your pitch and practicing that pitch. So if we think about it, like the pitch most often wants to present the big opportunity, the big vision. It's the tool that you're using really to articulate why somebody should be super excited about your venture. So whether that's a customer and they should be super excited about the solution that you can offer them, whether that's an investor and they should be super excited about wanting to put money into your venture so that they can get a huge return on your big success, or whether that's, like on Monday with an RDC or potentially the drought hubs, how you communicate to them and why they would want to support you in getting out to their constituents, right? So the pitch is all about the opportunity and why people externally should be really excited about what you're doing. Okay. The next piece of the playbook is what we call the commercialization plan. So this is now the more internal to the venture facing plan of action, right? So we've got this like kind of vision and opportunity that we've articulated through the pitch, but what do we need to do to make that a reality, right? What are the things that need to come together for what you're working on to be a long-term, sustaining, viable venture, right? So through identifying, prioritizing the risks, and then what actions need to be put in place to validate those risks and make that vision a reality. So now what the commercialization plan is actually going to kind of look and feel like, it is fairly simple. We want it to be as useful as possible for all of you. So we've talked about the 5 like kind of venture success factors, right? So team, market, solution, challenge alignment. So like industry alignment, do people, want this? Does it align with drought, that sort of thing? And then business model. And so the commercialization plan looks at each of those areas, and we're looking for the major actions that need to be put in place to get to where you need to get to. So within the template, we'll be asking, where are you now? So the team is, me and Ben are the team right now. Where you need to get to? Well, as it turns out, Ben's great from an organizational perspective, great on setting up systems, I like to talk and meet people, fantastic, but neither of us has the in-depth experience in developing this AI tool coupled with like this huge manufacturing like output that we need to get to. So we need to bring in someone with that expertise to act as like the CTO, right? In that case. So where are we now? Me and Ben, where we need to get to, we need to have a CTO and let's say a couple of developers and maybe a sales rep in place. How are we going to get there? So the commercialization plan is really focused on the period of the next 12 months. So within the next 2 weeks, we're going to start the interview process. So we're going to post a job description. We're going to post it on LinkedIn. We're going to get it to Beanstalk so Beanstalk can start circulating it around. We're going to talk to our VB and Juno about the co-founder like matching process. And then we're expecting to start interviews in a month and a half, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So where are you now, where you need to get to, and then how and when you plan to get there. If it's around fundraising, we're going to identify, our list of investors. I think you get the point at this point. But that's really the way it's structured. It's meant to, again, be quite simple. We're expecting it to be about 5 to 6 pages of just bullet points, really. So we're not looking for, a masterpiece, a manuscript, a blog article, like just simple, to the point, dot points, so that one, it is useful for you and your team to refer back to. And then for us to really get a clear, aligned understanding of the priorities for the venture. We're going to start working on these with you this week in the one-on-ones. Like your pitch, they will be a continuously evolving artifact document that fits into your plan. So even as you leave the studio, hopefully this is something that you refer back to often, that you update, and that like ultimately like fits into a roadmap for your venture's next 12 months. I guess I will also just highlight as well. So it is a requirement for graduation from the program. So we'll start working on it with you now, like I said, but it is required. We feel it is quite valuable for you. So required for graduation. And then it is also for us a very valuable input in how we look at making our selection ultimately for phase 2, right? So 1 for the showcase and then 2 for who gets into phase 2. So a couple of really good reasons beyond just your own hopeful value for working on these. Any questions? Okay, if you do have any further questions that come up, you can ping me directly on Slack, over email, or talk to your VB. They should be able to answer any of your questions as well. And there we go. So we'll hand it back over.
Cool, thanks, Jeremy. I'll preempt a couple of possible questions. As you'll see, it's a really simple template. I mean, we can provide you a Word doc template, but it's fine to be in a Google Doc or elsewhere. It's supposed to be really flexible, so that if you've already got existing plans, it'll be really, really easy just to sort of like pull some data or information across. Yeah, just to echo what Jeremy said, it's got to be practical and it's going to be very useful. It's not some form-filling exercise or some abstract 100-page commercialization plan that no one reads. So yeah, hopefully it'll be very, very useful. And yes, Guillermo, we will be touching on deadlines for some of these artifacts shortly, but I do not expect this to be a time-intensive exercise. The most time-intensive exercise is actually to think about probably, well, what are the most important objectives we will be pursuing over the next 12 months? And if you haven't already thought through that, then that's definitely an important part of the process. Don't think any other questions are popping up in the chat, but Mariana, it is like a business plan. And just to sort of give a little bit more context, for a lot of early stage ventures, a business plan can be overrated because things are changing so frequently. You know, you can spend weeks putting together a business plan, but in the meantime, you've got some customer insights that will ensure that you have to do a pivot, or something changes that means that you need to have a different point of view on your go-to-market, or your product has changed, or something like this. So a traditional business plan is generally something done for more established organizations where things don't change every 3 weeks or 6 months or something like that. But you can see it as just a very simplified version of a business plan put together. I think, but as you can see, sort of from the slide that I'm showing at the minute, like really, it's just the objectives and then a few dot points under each of those categories. So I'd expect that most of you would be able to write it out, a first draft of it, in sort of 30 minutes. If you've got any other questions, feel free to have a chat to your VB, who will probably be sharing a version of the template with you over the next couple of days, or shoot them through on Slack, or get in direct touch with Jeremy if you'd so prefer. Okay, I think we can keep moving forward now. So this section, I'm going to be taking you through a lot more details about phase 2 selection, which includes a whole bunch of things around timings, around artifacts, and around eligibility. Again, while I'm talking, if you want to put your hand up or put something into chat, I'm very happy to answer the question during, or also we'll have some time for after. So just to recap where we're at, and most of you will know, all of you will know that the Beanstalk Venture Studio has these 2 components, these 2 phases. Phase 1, which you're right in the middle of, is a 3-month kind of phase, which is more about validating and de-risking and identifying the key elements and viability of your venture. Building the pitch, as you'll very know about very well. And then lastly, we've just introduced this kind of commercialization plan to really articulate the venture's priorities and plans. The phase 2 is the larger and longer 12-month phase that we offer up to 4 selected ventures from the current cohort to participate. So that phase is a much higher level of kind of action and support and input. You have the dedicated hands-on venture builder, and it's not just kind of the occasional 30-minute or 60-minute one-on-one session. There's more dedicated support. I think about 40% of the venture builder's time over 11 or 12 months. There's also explicit financial support. So when you bring out the, when you crunch the actual numbers on a cash equivalent, that's about $175,000. So that's about $100,000 available as a salary stipend. And so that is applicable to someone at sort of the co-founder or very strategic level, someone who's dedicated and committed to the venture. For many of you, that will be about finding someone who can join the team, and they might be a commercial or sales or marketing person, and they might qualify for the stipend. But there's some degree of flexibility on how that stipend can get deployed. And then there's another $75,000 which is available for other services, and so these are more classic, venture expenses. That might be on building out a prototype, or that might be on paying some legal fees, or it might be about some research or something like that. There's a lot more flexibility around that element as well. And just a reminder, even for those ventures that have qualified or are selected into phase 2, that it's completely non-dilutive, which means that we don't take any equity or any share in your business. So it's non-dilutive support and funding. So just a very, very small taste of some of the different components of phase 2. So for the ones that are selected, we'll sort of take you through a bit of an onboarding process, and we have a participation agreement that you'll need to review and go through, and that just basically outlines all the details of the agreement on the funding and the plans and expectations and general terms. So we'll do that shortly after the selection process. We then sort of go through a preliminary planning time with you. This would likely sort of happen towards the end of February, early March. I mean, given that you'll already be completing these commercialization plans, and we'll also be gathering a little bit more information from you, we should be having a clear idea of how you're going to deploy the funds and the resources and stuff like that. So it's a little bit of a planning session. And then the formal kickoff of phase 2, which I think is either towards the end of March or maybe early April of this year, is when we really get into the building phase. So the dedicated hands-on support around 2 days a week, and active connections to investors, agribusinesses, partners. Basically, you know, VB will be jumping into the trenches with you and helping you advance and build out your venture, and, you know, making progress to your objectives for the following 12 months. There's also going to be sort of a lightweight advisory board or committee, which will help support you and also track your progress over the time of the 12 months. We'll probably go into a few more details about phase 2 at a slightly later stage, but I just wanted to give you a quick flavour of that. As I said, that's up to 4 ventures for around 12 months of support. So now we get into some of the good stuff, the nitty-gritty details. So the selection for phase 2 is a competitive process. Hopefully you already know that, but this is a little bit of a breakdown of how your eligibility and the selection process will work. So obviously we have all 24 innovators in the current cohort working hard on all their various ventures and pitches and soon commercialization plans. At the end of week 10, which is next week, we will be coming together as a studio team and making the selection of the top 12 ventures within the cohort. So what we've been doing internally here at Beanstalk is every single fortnight we have a studio-wide review session where we go through and talk about every single one of your ventures and the progress, the challenges. We look at, you know, how you're shaping up against our framework and eligibility criteria. What are the things that we'd like to see, and basically keeping a fairly close tab on your progress overall. And so that will culminate at the end of next week with a selection of the top 12. So the reason that's important is that only the top 12 ventures will actually be eligible for consideration to phase 2. So that's basically the first hurdle. Well, you've already made it into the top 24, so that's the first hurdle. But the next hurdle is to make it into that top 12. And the reason we do that is that for those top 12, we get to provide a little bit more specific support and help in the one-on-ones, and we also take you through a little bit of a pitching boot camp as well. So that work happens between weeks 11 and 12. So the top 12 will be focusing on a little bit more of a pitching boot camp. And the remainder of the ventures in the cohort will still be working hard, still be working with their one-on-ones, with their VBs, and basically fleshing out what the pathway is ahead for that venture and the work that needs to be done. And that will come to life in the commercialization plan as well. So that will take us through to the conclusion of week 12, which is the formal end of the program and phase 1. At that time, we will be further picking the top 8. So we'll be going from top 12 down to top 8. And those top 8 are the ones that will be invited to pitch at our showcase up in Brisbane, just ahead of Evoke Ag, in February around 17th or something like that. And for those top 8, there's basically another couple of weeks of extra support, pitching, refinement of your decks, final refinement of some of your artifacts that we'll talk about shortly. Yeah, that shortlisting to the top 8 happens at the conclusion of this current phase, which is in another 3 weeks or so. Obviously, for all the innovators and ventures, no matter what category you fall into, at the conclusion of the phase, we're building a studio alumni community. So we have all the innovators from our first cohort. We'll have all the innovators from this current cohort. We'll be lumping in a bunch of our experts and potential co-founders, a range of other people from across the Beanstalk ecosystem. I think that's one of the greatest assets that Beanstalk does boast, that we have very extensive connections and a very great footprint across various aspects of the ag tech ecosystem. And so we're really, really keen to build that alumni community out, continue sharing information, news, events, support, suggestions, and hopefully continue to make connections and introductions in any way that we can support your venture. And I think that's probably all I need to talk about on that process. Are there any quick questions before I go ahead to talk about the phase 2 eligibility criteria on some of those timings and going into a top 12 or top 8? No questions popping up, I don't think. Oh no, we do. Rasul, have you got a question?
Hello, thank you for your explanation. Quick question about how have you considered, for example, in phase, for example, top 12 or top 8, how have you considered the short list? Have you considered the whole weeks or just focus on those 2 weeks, for example, in top 12, in top 8?
Yeah, good question, Rasul. So the process that we employ is we assess all aspects of the venture. So we don't just look at 1 week or 2 weeks. We look at the trajectory and progress of the venture, and we do that against the eligibility criteria that I've just put up on screen here. So you'll remember at the start of this cohort, we basically shared this slide that kind of outlines both the framework to our program, but also the eligibility criteria to get into phase 2. And so I might, to answer your question, I might dive into a little bit more detail on this. But the entire venture building team and a couple of other ag experts from the wider Beanstalk team get together, have already been getting together every 2 weeks. Maybe that's one of the questions you're asking. We've been doing it every fortnight since the inception. And we talk about each venture and their progress against each of those kind of 5 criteria. So the first one is about team. So to be eligible for this competitive process, we're obviously very keen to see a committed founding team, or if not founding team, like an identification of who would need to complement the team and bring other skills and capabilities in the future. It's really important that we see some aligned incentives, and that's kind of code for ensuring that the equity and cap table is a fair representation of the people who are going to be involved. For early stage ventures to succeed, then we love to see people who are throwing themselves into it to be rewarded or recognized with equity. And as I mentioned, some clarity on what the future team needs are. So that's very important, and that's essentially a summary of how we look at team and eligibility for phase 2. On the market and customers criteria, as we've sort of talked about previously, it's really important that there's a clear understanding about who the primary customer segment is, and as much insight and clarity around them and their needs and problems as is possible, and ensuring that there's some degree of validation from actual, or I can even call it prospective customers. So admittedly, some of the ventures here today are at different stages of their maturity and life cycle, but even at early stages, we're very, very keen to see some actual validation from real or prospective customers. Getting some insight into the size and potential of the market. I think I've seen a lot of the pitches thus far are starting to get some good progress on that and getting some good numbers around what the actual market looks like. And starting to shape a go-to-market strategy. Again, I've seen a lot of evidence of people talking about how they're going to be doing this in a phased approach and how they're going to be looking at different customer segments at different times, or over time, I should say. The solution and IP front, what's critical is that the IP ownership or transfer process is clear. I think for all of the ventures in this cohort who need to resolve this situation, we have sort of a separate work stream where we're actively engaging with you and your either university or tech transfer office around that, because it is important that there is a pathway for IP extraction prior to phase 2 kicking off. And I think all those people are pretty familiar with the timings and process that we do on that. In terms of the product and solution itself, the fact that there's some technical feasibility around it, even for the people who are just planning to build their first MVP, like that's important around feasibility. And certainly getting a sense of what the product roadmap looks like. Again, I've seen some evidence, plenty of you mapping out what your plans are for the product in coming months ahead. On challenge and industry alignment, so having a clear understanding of impact on drought is super important. That's why we're all here. Certainly you wouldn't be here if there wasn't any impact, but it is an important part of the criteria. A lot of you have very, very direct impacts on drought. Others have maybe slightly more indirect ones, which is fine. Like we draw a pretty broad kind of bow around that, but it's still important that that is clearly stated and understood. How you fit into the industry, whether or if there are some key partnerships that you need to be connected with, and most critically, an insight into your competitive landscape. And this is normally something that starts coming together maybe a little bit later. I think fewer of you have got a really good insight into your competitive landscape, but I think most of you do already have some slides or some information on the competitors. But again, that's important for us to be able to look to in terms of eligibility. And finally, the business model. So, always keen to see that there is a financial model put together that maps out how you're planning to grow over time in terms of your revenue or cost or the speed of your growth. For some of you, this might be fairly simple, or for some of you, you might not have revenue coming for a while yet. That's all right. It's just crucial to understand what your financial position is and what your cash flow is looking like and how you're forecasting that to evolve over time. And the last one is just understanding, where or how your future funding is going to come from. Again, there's a lot of difference across the cohort. Some of you are looking at bootstrapping. Some of you are looking at raising venture capital. Some of you are looking for further grants or R&D benefits. And some of you are looking for customer pilots or paid customer agreements to sustain your next kind of chapter. So again, it doesn't have to go into a hugely sophisticated level of detail, but how the business model is shaping up, and it's been thought through, the different components, and then the financial components of that are important too. So that's kind of like the foundational part of the selection criteria around eligibility. So those 5 factors are the ones that, are really part of that competitive, which ventures are in a position to be eligible across as many of those criteria as possible. Not every single venture is going to be ticking every one of those boxes. So we do look at it at a holistic level as well. But then there's kind of this other component too that we look at in terms of the phase 2 selection criteria, and that's something that we call studio fit. So this is a very important consideration for us as we looked ahead to phase 2. It's broken into 2 things, a resource alignment and objective alignment. So when I'm talking about resource alignment, the question is, how well aligned are the needs of the venture with what the studio can provide? So I've just previously mapped out the types of components of the things that we do offer in phase 2, the VB support, the 175K in cash equivalent grant funding, and the connections and stuff like that. If those types of elements of funding and connections or support aren't the most important thing for your venture, then obviously there's less alignment around your own needs, and it would be less likely that you'd be considered for selection. The other component is objective alignment. So how well aligned your objectives over the next 12 months, and how well do they fit into the success measures that we're targeting for you? So phase 2 is a 12-month program. It's a relatively short amount of time in the ag tech world, and what we really want you to be in the position of at the end of phase 2 is having a clear runway and funding for 18 months, maybe a little bit less in some scenarios or maybe more in others. But what we really want you to be in the position of after that 12 months is to be able to emerge from the studio's support with autonomy, independence, and 18 months of runway. Now, for some people, that might be very, very difficult. For many of the ventures, like we're experiencing the previous cohort, basically that means there does need to be some funding plans put in place, whether that's venture funding or grant funding or partner funding. But really the focus is at the conclusion of phase 2, these ventures will be independent, autonomous, and ready to sort of progress to their next stage of growth. So, if there's no pathway in 12 months for a customer agreement or a paid pilot or some new trials or funding or grant money, if that's going to be impossible to achieve in the 12-month time cycle, then it's going to be less likely that you're going to be selected for phase 2 because it's not sufficient alignment on objectives and the timings around those objectives as well. So I'm going to take a quick pause there and rest my weary voice. If there's any questions about that selection criteria, again, feel free to pipe up or have a chat to your VB. Equally, if you need a little bit of time to digest it and think about how that fits in with where you're up to, then that's totally fine. You can get back to us during the week or give one of us a shout. What I'll do now is kind of map out where that leaves everyone and our plans and artifacts and key moments in time over the next few weeks. So we're up to week 9, as you can see. Then we got, weeks 10. At that point, remember, we'll be doing the top 12 selection. A couple of weeks after that, we'll be doing the top 8 selection. And then you can see a couple of the key dates that we've highlighted. So in terms of pitching, if you think about it, this week's pitch and next week's pitch become really, really important, because it's one of your last chances to impress, put your best foot forward, and show how your plans are coming together for when we select the top 12. So key takeaway there is that your next 2 pitches are really, really important. We understand that no one's going to have a perfect, polished pitch necessarily in a week or 2. But again, we are going to be using that as a key input into our top 12 selection. For the ones that do go into the top 12, then essentially your pitches over weeks 11 and 12 become super duper important, because they will inform your selection into the top 8. So I think that's relatively straightforward. Short story is you're going to be continuing to pitch and improve and refine over the next 3 to 4 weeks. The commercialization plan that Jeremy took us through today, we'll probably start circulating it this week, and we'll share a template, and you can start working on that over the next week or 2. Again, I don't think it's particularly time intensive, but what we will be requesting is for everyone to have submitted their draft commercialization plan by the end of week 11. It is a prerequisite to sort of, graduate from the venture studio. And again, regardless of whether you're in the top 12 or not, we want that document to be actually meaningful, practical, and useful plan for your future, whatever your pathway may be. And again, it's not particularly time intensive. It really is just supposed to provoke you to think about where you're up to, where you need to get to, and what you need to do. It's the simplest possible strategic planning framework around, and it'll be very, very valuable for you. And then, again, you'll be getting some input and support from your VB on that. The final version of that would need to be submitted halfway through week 12. And then one last little nugget is that for the top 12, we will be getting you to submit a short application or submission for phase 2. This is just to round out a couple of things that we might need for sure. I know some of you have already provided them, but prior to us selecting the top 8, we just need to make sure that we understand, for example, the cap table, understand where your financial sort of plans or cash flow is up to, need a little bit of confirmation about where your IP is up to. But again, I think it's only 6 or 7 questions for that phase 2 application. And again, you don't need to worry about that too much for the next couple of weeks, but we'll invite people to draft that in week 11 and then conclude it in week 12, your final phase 2 application. And as a reminder, only the top 12 people will be eligible to submit their application for phase 2. Now, if I have not confused at least half of the people here with weeks 11, top 12, the top 8, weeks 10, draft final, then I'd be very, very ashamed of myself, because there is a bit of complexity under the covers, but really it doesn't change the situation for all of you to keep working hard, advancing your venture, getting what support you can from the studio, improving your pitch, and getting your commercialization plan together. It's all happening, and it's still more of the same. But hopefully this timeline and the milestones give you a little bit more of a better sense of what's involved in that. The key thing I'll just leave you with, and if there are any questions, please raise your hand or jump into the chat, is that the next 2 weeks do become pretty important to make sure that the ones who are desperate to get into phase 2, well, you've got to get into the top 12 first. And if you think that there are any elements in the eligibility criteria you went through that you haven't talked about or you haven't addressed enough with your VB, or maybe are missing from your pitch deck, this is your chance over the next two weeks to really round out and flesh it out a little bit. A question from Mariana. I see the commercialization plan does not need to be included in the pitch. A lot of you do have a bit of a roadmap of your plans or some of your key objectives, but as Jeremy sort of outlined earlier, the pitch is really the external facing, showing the opportunity. The commercialization plan is a little bit more about how you intend to do that. And that document, as you can see from the timing, you'll start working on soon, but there's another 2 or 3 weeks before that comes together. Okay, I think I've succeeded because I see some slightly dazed faces on my screen. So I think that's mission accomplished. Again, we'll be posting this recording and the pitch deck on the Notion portal either at the end of the today or first thing tomorrow. So if you need a reference to it or you need to be reminded of the timings, let us know. But again, the short-term critical thing is the next week or two to really to put your best foot forward. And there's a question from Beck Hopper about willing to share the agreement ahead of applying for phase 2. Yes, that's a very good question. We have a phase 2 participation agreement that we will be sharing with people prior to them having to think about applying for it. We should have that in a week or 2 max. We just need a few refinements to that. But yeah, it is it's only about a 2-page or so legal document outlining the requirements and obligations and terms. So you will be able to review that prior to submitting your application for phase 2 back. Okay, I better wrap us up there because I'm only a couple of minutes behind schedule, which is a small miracle. And I might pass across to Ben to bring us home with details about the week ahead.
Thank you, Juz. So we are in week 9, if it hadn't been made clear yet. So yes, one-on-ones continue, a great opportunity to continue fleshing out your pitch deck with your venture builder. And this week also beginning a bit of a start on your commercialization plan, as we've discussed. Pitch practice again this Friday. Similar to last week, we will be shuffling up the groups again. Some of the groups may also feature a non-Beanstalk person who will provide some feedback as well. And as Juz did mention, this Friday, as well as next Friday, really your last opportunities to put your best pitch forward, if you like, for selection into the top 12. A reminder that we're targeting 8 minutes. Looking across the board, there's still a fair bit of variability around that target. So please practice if you have time to really hit that 8-minute mark. Just finally, a reminder that there are now 2 surveys out in the world that we would really love you to complete. So you would have received an email on Friday afternoon with respect to the Innovator survey. So if you remember, just before Christmas, we asked you to complete a survey to give us an indication of how you saw the commercial readiness of your venture coming into the program. We're now looking to get sort of a halfway data point against those measures. And this is really to help us in the studio ensure that we are delivering an effective program. So you will have that link to the Innovator survey in your inbox, asking if you can complete that by the end of tomorrow. And just a reminder that we have been speaking a lot about phase 2 selection, and how you respond to that survey is not an input in any shape or form to your phase 2 selection. And then these things come in pairs. So we also mentioned the RDC Ask Me Anything meetup next Monday. I've posted into the chat the link to the survey for that. So if you could please take a look at that, also complete it by tomorrow, by the end of tomorrow. And that's really just for you to put forward your first and second preference for the RDC you would like to be in a group with, and hitting them up with all the hard and tough questions. So 2 surveys to be completed by the end of tomorrow. And I think that's a wrap. Juz, back to you.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Ben. Lots of details we waded through today. Hopefully they're digestible enough. So yeah, there's a couple of short surveys would be terrific. Otherwise, I'm sure you're looking forward to diving into your one-on-ones with your VB. Again, you'll get the chance to talk through the feedback from your pitches on Friday. I know there was some excellent feedback that started to flow through. And maybe ask any other questions you have about the commercialization plan or the process going forward. So again, thanks everyone for bearing through all of the details, and now we will let you go back into the real world and hopefully push on with all your excellent work. So thanks again for joining us, and have a great week.